Welcome to the Business of Cannabis podcast, live from Cannabis Europa. I'm your host, Shahbaaz Kara-Virani, and we're talking to you from the Barbican Centre here in London. What a beautiful venue. And it is my delight to welcome the incredible Pat Cash. Pat, how are you, man?
Very well, thank you. Enjoying
us.
the beautiful London weather.
Yeah, it's nice out there.
Yeah,
huh?
but we're inside, aren't we?
Yeah.
So we're missing it. It's like 3 decent days for the summer. So
Is this typical for London, this weather?
well, not always. Of course, we're at Wimbledon. Wimbledon's coming up. It's only around the corner. The Wimbledon qualifying is starting today, so it's just all really ramping up. And typically, it's typically they have some wet weather, but it's all of a sudden come good. So it's a busy time for me. As I said, the qualifying goes on. I usually have some players that I'm involved with in qualifying or have been involved. So as they try and go through the rankings, and then of course when Wimbledon starts, I'm not actually working in a coaching capacity at this time, but I'll be doing commentating.
Oh,
So
nice.
I do lots of commentating. So that's sort of been my main gig, really, commentating and coaching over the last few years, 15, 20 years since I retired. So from the game of tennis.
And I want to get deep into your journey. I can't wait. Don't tell anyone. This is going to be one of my favorite conversations. I feel like we have a lot.
Because you're a sports person.
I'm a sports fanatic.
Yeah.
But let me ask you. So what's early predictions on? Can you say who do you think is going to win?
I wish I knew. I tell some of my friends and they go and make a bet on it. But look, it's very hard to say. I tend to think there's only a couple of winners in the men's. It's changed. It's a changing of the guard, really. So
Big time.
Djokovic may or may not play. We don't know yet. I doubt that he'll be. If he does play, he'll be in great form. Obviously, Federer's retired. Nadal's still injured.
Yeah.
Murray is barely hanging in there. So the young players, Yannick Sinner, Italian guy, and Carlos Alcaraz, the Spanish, who just won the French Open. He might be
Powerful.
tired after the French Open, so I'm going to edge with Sinner, who's the world number one. And the women's side, Swiatek from Poland, she's number one. She's clearly number
Great.
one.
Yeah.
She hasn't performed well on grass. She's going to eventually. But I think Sabalenka from Belarus, she's so big and powerful.
Yeah,
so I think they're
forehand is something else.
there's always upsets in the tournament, but at the moment they're the four that I really can't go past.
I'm surprised you didn't mention any of my Canadian squad there. We got Shapopula. We got
Auger Aliassime. He plays great. He plays well. And of course Milos Raonic is the biggest serving guy there is. So
Yeah.
he's he's off and on with injuries, but he's always a danger on the grass. Nobody wants to see your name next to him to him in the draw.
Big time.
That's for sure.
On the ladies' side, I'd like to see Coco Gauff. I think it's
she could possibly pull it off. There's a concern about her consistency. She cannot beat Swiatek. Her record is like 0-10 or something like that. So, but anybody can beat anybody. So she's definitely in the mix. There's no doubts about that.
Well, it's what timing that we got the great Pat Cash here, former Wimbledon champion. But why don't we just take a second, Pat? Tell us how we even got to this moment. You're at a cannabis event, Cannabis Europa, the number one event where all the leaders from around Europe, North America, Canada, New York, etc., are here building various emerging markets, and we got the great Pat Cash with us. Tell us a little bit about the journey to even get here.
Gee, it's a long journey, but in a nutshell, small as I can possibly say, is that throughout my career and my life, I've had a lot of injuries. I've had through sports and everything else that goes with it. I've had about 15 surgeries on my body.
That's it.
That's it. Yeah. This is not bad for a non-contact sport. I'm not a hockey player, right, or a rugby player. So that's a lot of surgeries, and I've been looking to find methods of pain relief. I had a doctor come to me a few years ago and say. Said, there's something not so happy about your kidney function. And I'm like, oh, okay. He said, well, I checked the results from last year. There's nothing to worry about, but, do you take anything regularly that I should know about? And I go, well, anti-inflammatory pills, I goes, oh, okay. When do you take those? Oh, whenever I'm sore or playing or going to play. And how often do you play? Well, pretty much every day. How many years? 20 years. She goes, oh my God, so 20 years you've been taking these things? Oh, straight away. No, get off them straight away. So then I started looking at, what can replace. And this was quite a few years ago. So I sort of went cold turkey, and then eventually
Cold turkey on the opioids.
on the not the opioids, no, just the painkillers,
yeah.
yeah, and so anti-inflammatories, which my body are aching when I got back out and started
Tough
playing.
to go cold turkey like that.
Yeah, you know what it's like. See, all of a sudden you go for a minor workout and you're like, oh, I'm so sore.
Yeah.
But my kidney function wasn't all that healthy. But so from that there was really an exploration into the CBD and cannabinoids, and it's something that I've been aware of from my early days as a kid, smoking some stuff with my mates illegally in Australia.
Yeah.
And there was one incident early on in my career where somebody here in the UK gave me something to smoke, and I used to have a puff before I went to bed, knowing that I was playing Wimbledon, a match the next day. I played really well that year. I was relaxed and I slept really well, and I would have been drug tested and been chucked out of the tournament now, but they didn't have the drug testing there, and I just thought it was a bit of fun. It was like in the early 80s, but it's gone a full circle now, and I've come back to realize, wait a minute, the painkilling and the relaxation, athletes need to perform. If they perform well, they need to be relaxed to be performing well. They need to be, they need to be on fire. They need to be sharp. So there's some elements of marijuana that will not work, and hence they've been banned. I don't see how they possibly are performance enhancing, but that's the way the water has gone. But I suppose maybe they're concerned about other methods that people can adjust stuff to get performance enhancing. But it's certainly the non-THC cannabinoids have been extremely powerful for me with analgesic pain killing, particularly CBD-A. That's been fantastic. Through recovering from the last surgery or so that I've had, and the injuries coming back, the rehabbing. What it's like when you're rehabbing, it's no fun. And I've done this so many times. It's like, oh my God, this is going to kill me again. You're back to square one, and you have to get back to square one every time.
It's so interesting because especially back then when there's so much misinformation now, and CBD almost becomes this buzzword. You can slap a label on something and CBD, and
that's the concern, isn't it, with the industry? Yeah,
it is, and I want to get there in a second. But back then when you were learning, this was 15, 20 years ago, where did you even go to learn about CBD? Was it just trial and error, or what was the accessibility like?
I didn't know anything about CBD back then, and it was only in recent years that I really started doing a bit of a deep dive into it and saying, hey, I've always wanted to start my own health company, which will be everything from waters to actually healthcare to supplements and products. So CBD was one of the first ones on our list. The market there's a big market there. There's also a saturated market. So, and there's very good products and there's very bad products.
Yeah.
So it's having to navigate that, and of course the regulations has been a real learning curve for us.
Big time.
Where do we go? Do we start in Japan, Australia, Europe? But what we've found is that there is a need for. I've gone for but primarily my ethos is to try and get the best possible product or best possible care for people, whether that's the medical care, whether it's stem cells down that path, whether it's simply best water and additives into water, as in minerals and other supplements and things like that. I discovered through the experience, I discovered a whole lot of things at work and a whole lot of people where you run into the wildest people, and they say, this is an immune boosting thing that's never been heard of, and I'm like, okay, that sounds interesting. Let's look into it. I've got an inquisitive mind. I've always had an open mind to tennis, to coaching, and to supplements. And back in my day, as I said, when I first started, I was the first player to do any amino acid taking, and I believe one of the first athletes to do any amino acid testing. There was one facility in the world that did testing for amino acids in full body full body, full blood, and that was in Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia. And they did the college team there. The guy said, "Well, you're the first professional athlete I'm dealing with. We've done one college team, but nobody wants to get their bloods and everything analyzed. We'll get it exactly right." So it was fatty acids. It was the various supplements that I was taking. The amino acids are disgusting. They didn't have any flavor back in those days. And ever since through that, I've been, where can I get the cutting edge? Where can I get the best stuff? Where can I get the cutting edge? And I don't know if I'll ever be ahead of the game, but I certainly was in my era. And with now knowing the players the way they are, they're kind of like me. They're really off the anti-inflammatories now.
Yeah.
What can help them recover? What gives them the cutting edge? And we've known the players who go in hyperbaric chambers. I don't know for sure, but I'd be very, very surprised if they're not doing stem cell type of stuff. Recovery at the end of the year. They're doing all this sort of stuff.
PRP stuff, yeah.
PRPs for any injuries, that sort of stuff. And the CBD and the cannabis is a big interest. And all the players and coaches I've talked to, they all, oh yes, I've heard about this. Some of them are taking it. Some of them are nervous about THC content. That's why we're quite interested in the lab grown stuff. But they're concerned about getting drug tested and getting something bad. And with a bit too much THC content, wasn't tested properly. Hey, my mate's recommended this. That doesn't cut it really for a professional athlete.
Big time. It's funny how THC is just this ugly stepchild. Well,
it is. It is in sports, but it's not in life.
Yeah.
I have nothing against take THC, and I think that's a really important balance. But for athletes,
for sure,
it's a different story.
Well, and that's what I want to get to, because and one thing I'll say is, Pat Cash, I'm so happy that you're building this company as a former professional beach soccer player, as a child of a professional cricketer. What you're doing for athletes and longevity is huge, and I wish that I can just tell you, I wish my dad had grown up with the level of knowledge that you're delivering through your organization.
I'd grown up with it as well, to be honest. We're learning so much all the time.
And it's crazy to see what's going to happen in 10 years, and I want to get to that. But really quickly, I mean, as you start to build in this, this plant medicine and this whole wellness and longevity portfolio, obviously plant medicine is a piece of it, right? The CBD is a piece of it. How do you manage all the stigma plus navigate, you said the regulators and the league, bodies that govern, that's a lot of different opinions and a lot of lack of education. So how do you manage that?
Well, I think it's education process, and I think to a certain extent it's a bit of a trial and error. There is not many, if any, actual players, professional athletes that have started their own company and working with CBD. There's a few that have sort of joined up with a company, but none have really, maybe one or two actually started one. So it's an education process. And so, my going to the players, the athletes, and with somebody they can trust. So my name, they have to trust me.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the bottom line. They have to trust me. I think I've got good credentials in that area. I've also certainly people who know a bit about, certainly tennis, but other athletes know that I'm a bit of a health freak, and I know my stuff. Hey, I'm not a scientist. Okay, I put my hand up and say, I don't know everything. There's no doubts about that. I'm still learning. But
that's literally the premise of being a scientist. So you are a scientist. So you actually are a scientist.
Let's discover stuff. Exactly. But what I've found and what the players have found has been, and this is how I got into it, there's anxiety. Every athlete is anxious when they get up there. They've got to be a bit anxious because that gets the adrenaline going. But if there's too much adrenaline, it doesn't work. Tennis is one of those great sports, and every sport, to be honest, you've got to be focused, but you've got to be fired up, but not too fired up. You've got to be calm, but not too calm, right? So you've got to have that right balance where you're sharp. Your muscles have got to be loose. And CBD, for me and for everybody that I've talked to, the muscle softness has been absolutely nothing short of extraordinary. It's over a month or 2 months, your muscles become more supple and you recover much better. A loose muscle is a good muscle. A tight muscle doesn't stretch. So when people you go to the gym and like, I want to be really ripped and look, my stomach's so hard. I said, well, you might be able to do a whole bunch of sit. You might look good, but it's a tight muscle. You need a loose muscle to be able to flex and unflex. You look at Usain Bolt doing 100 meters. You look at his face. It looks like he's going for a jog.
Yeah.
He looks like he's just walked out and going for a little morning stroll. His face is so relaxed. His arms are so relaxed. He can do that sort of. So tennis, with the pressure and everything, I've found, and the players are now finding that it helps takes the edge off the anxiety, shall we say. So you're not so relaxed that you don't care about playing a match. Okay, there's a tournament next week. You actually can perform your best because you can think clearer and you can recover better. So that's one element. Then there's the sleep, the jet lag, the flying. Mm-hmm. Every week is a new hotel, a new pillow. I travel with a pillow, but most players travel with a different pillow, different food. To be a tennis player, you've got to be unbelievably adaptable. So the CBD, cannabinoids, even lab-grown CBD, which has absolutely zero THC, we can guarantee that. That falls nicely into the athlete's mindset.
Beautifully said, and a whole well of pieces that I want to continue to discuss with you. But I gotta ask you, man. The NBA is loosening up their laws around cannabis. The MLB, same thing, and so the movement's definitely in North America. And in Europe, you're trailblazing it right now, right? And so when it comes to different tennis federations, what are those barriers? There's an athletic barrier to entry and kind of getting the athletes and the tennis players involved. But in terms of the federations in general, are you seeing a little stickiness as it relates to being able to adopt this? Do you see a world where CBD is a substance that's actually continuously recommended versus are you seeing the switch now within the federations a little bit as well?
Well, it's mainly they're going to follow the governing bodies, the WADAs of the world, the ones World Testing Drug, and they now say 0.0003% is okay to THC content to have in you. It's I'm hoping that people will get a better understanding. Particularly of the depression and the issues that athletes have, and realize that a stoned athlete is not going to perform well, okay? But a healthy athlete who's had a good night's sleep with a bit of THC is good. It's a good thing for them. I mean, hopefully the government will see that, and the athletics, the drug associations will see that at some stage. I'm not sure where they will, but it's also following the governmental rules. Or we knew during COVID that these were the rules the government said. Whichever country you went to, you're going to have to follow those ruls. Okay.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what I think. Doesn't matter what the tennis association. They're like, well, we should be letting these players out. The government says no. You're staying in the hotels during the lockdown if you want to play. And I was involved in that for a year. It was horrendous. So we got to follow what the local governments say. I am impressed by the relaxation of some of the sporting bodies in the US. I'm not sure when or where we'll get there in other sports around the world, but I think we've seen a tightening actually going the other way in Japan just really recently.
Yeah,
they've said okay, no THC in any of their products anywhere or next to nothing on the CBDs. So they've gone the other way now. So. Yeah. You go to Japan and you have some CBD. Hey, this is my CBD. I'm playing. And they go, well, actually, that's illegal now. Thank you. Come this way. You don't want that. So it's really got to be for the athletes. It's really traveling athletes, golfers, whatever. It's got to be really important that they trust the person they're talking to and the brand and that's what we're building as a health brand as something that people can trust.
Love that so much, and it reminds me of that story about Sha'Carri Richardson, the runner, who she smoked a joint that day. She found out her birth mother passed away, or whatever the case was, and she got disqualified from that race. And then she comes back a year later and she runs it and she wins it. And it's just this changing of the guard, this changing of it takes trailblazers like you to really change. Minds, right? One mind at a time kind of thing. Perhaps, and the crazy thing is she could have had, in that moment, she could have had, sips of vodka. She could have done all these different things, but and that would have been okay. But because she consumed cannabis, she wasn't, allowed.
Well, is it performance enhancing? That's the thing. I mean, there's plenty of products out there that follow, the peptides and whatever a really grey area.
Yeah.
Peptides in themselves are just amino acids, which I've talked about. I've taken since 1984 or whatever it was.
Which now, as an athlete, you can't live without. Essentially.
Yeah, almost. Yeah. But if you put it together and inject it in a peptide, then that's performance enhancing. So it's like, okay, where there's a grey area, and I understand that. Well, okay, she probably was aware of that. She was stressed, and she made a mistake for her career. So as athletes, you've got to be aware of that, and I mean, John McEnroe is funny. He laughs at me. We have a good laugh about it. We said, well, we used to take performance enhancing, drugs in our career. No, we'd never heard of a performance enhancing drug back in the 80s. I tend to think that marijuana and THC probably falls in that element, that department. But it's ever changing. We'll see what happens. But I would like the stigma of that to be disappearing, and I think that's important for governing bodies. And maybe it is important. I've had a lot of people come and say to me, "Wow, well done," for standing up and saying stuff. And I've done that many a time. I've had my head cut off a couple of times for speaking up about whatever it is. I tend to speak the truth, and hopefully, people will understand, or some governing bodies and governments will understand. This is okay.
I think the beautiful thing is sometimes as humans we're so stuck in our ways, right? You're a professional athlete. You play tennis every day. It's whatever the case. My parents are Indian, Kenyan parents. Even for them to understand that there's this new set of information that's coming into their mind. It's not necessarily they don't want to accept the information. It's also this barrier to kind of change a little bit and change the mindset. And fortunately and unfortunately for someone like you are this leader in this space, and you have the ability to really inspire and change. But it's going to be tough. I get to see it firsthand in the U.S. But with you leading the way and with some supporting cast, I think that we can really change kind of the mindsets and really usher in a new era of longevity for athletes. I especially love what you're saying around sleep. And so let me ask you, with kind of our last question here, what in a year or 2, 3 years from now, what's the vision for your health organization? What do you want to build this into? If you had a magic wand.
I'd love to be rehabbing athletes. That's my passion. Rehabbing people who have sort of gone down. I would always say the alternative route, which is the medical route. But get something. Have a clinic. Be able to supply people with some natural alternatives to things. There are so many unbelievable therapies out there, from frequencies to supplements, to stem cells, to whatever it happens to be. It's fascinating. It's fascinating what's out there, and I'd love to keep going and provide some. And I got some. The lucky thing is I've got a great team around me, and I think the bottom line is we want to help people.
Yeah,
we want to help people. So it's helping athletes. I mean, that's kind of what I'm doing as a tennis coach, as a father and grandfather. I want to help people.
The youngest looking grandfather in the game right here.
Four of them. My daughter started early, and my son too. But we want to help. We want to help people. That's the bottom line. And CBD was a great introduction for us. There's a quagmire of legislation and everything that's. Ideally, we're trying to destigmatize when we can, if we can, and get it more open. But the reality is, there's people that need help out there. Our foundation that we're going to create is really what we're all about. To be perfectly honest, we want to help people, and CBD and the health range and everything is part of that big project. We're just. Yeah, well, I suppose it kind of goes around full circle. We're kind of a bunch of hippies who just want to love peace and love, man.
I echo this.
To the fellow brother.
Echo the
but we're
same
going to be in the
sentiment.
Barbican and doing a podcast to do it.
Wonderful. I'm personally, truly, extremely privileged to have you on here. I can't wait to continue to build off the conversation. Where can our listeners, find more information on Cannabis Health? Where can they
Just
find
that, patcashhealth.com. Pretty simple,
Beauty.
pretty straightforward.
Again,
Make it easy.
patcashhealth.com. Thanks, Pat. Appreciate the time, my man.
Thank you very much.
Awesome.